Hello, everyone. This is Marie Jard, and today I'll be presenting Advancing Game Development, AI-driven asset creation, and concrete workflow integrations. So, before we starting, I think I'll introduce myself. I sort of have I would say like a unique background, but as many people today, to be honest. So I started my studies, and I'm actually a trained fine artist. Studied in the UK, went to Central St Martins, and then very quickly, because I was an installation artist, I was like, hey, how can I actually like bring this artwork into a digital space? So I started investigating a lot into AR and VR and started building in 2015, 2016 some completely immersive installations. Um, when I graduated from school for my master's, I kind of like realized that, so this brings us in 2017, I realized that there was very little infrastructure actually like available for artists that were showing in AR and VR. So I decided to co-found my first startup, which was an art gallery in augmented reality in London. So if you had wandered around Shoreditch, for example, you could actually like follow some set art galleries and basically like visualize some artworks. Um, it was cool. We got incubated by Google Campus and followed by Entrepreneur First as well. But obviously, like no one really wanted to pay to go and see some work in AR in London, especially where all galleries are free. So yeah, this didn't work. Completely failed. Didn't make a successful exit. Nothing like that. So I decided to kind of like deepen my tech and business knowledge coming from art school, and I got extremely lucky. I applied to the two companies that I wanted to go and join, which were Google and Amazon Web Services, because I had coded a whole platform for my startup, which was called Command Space. So wanted to join those two companies, did the interview, passed, and then basically joined them. Joined the startup team there. That's before the game tech vertical was created. So I was taking care of startups, but also indie studios. And I kind of like really enjoyed that. So 3 years at AWS, kind of like got into a comfort zone, and entrepreneurship really attracted me still. My solution architect at the time decided to co-found a startup, which was called Scenario, and I decided to go and join. So if you didn't know, Scenario is the most complete AI toolkit that's available out there to basically produce some consistent game asset. So jumping in into some key data, which I believe are extremely important to kind of like look at the state of the industry and the adoption of artificial intelligence. These data are of a survey that Unity conducted in 2023 and published at the end of 2023 as well. And these are also some key data from H16Z survey that they conducted with over 200 different studios and published, I believe it was in July 2023, something like that. So from these surveys, what they realized that already 62% of game developers were actually using artificial intelligence. So when I'm saying artificial intelligence, obviously I'm talking about generative, and then this englobes a wide different amount of AI. It can be for the production of game assets, for the production of narratives, for the production of code as well. And 71% of these studios actually approved that AI was improving their delivery and operations. And this is a crucial number, as 96% of surveyed studios actually mentioned that they were prototyping new ideas, new games in 3 months or less. And I really believe with the demand of gamers, that studios are in an increasing pressure to deliver high quality, unique games in a very short amount of time. So the issue with AI is very much adoption. It's one of the biggest blocker adoption, but it's also a lack of know-how, and obviously having very short, I would say, like deadlines to deliver prototypes and to deliver games. It's also the lack of time. Whether you're an indie developer, whether you work for a bigger studio, a biggest corporation, especially a bigger corporation, well, it's kind of like, hey, is this actually going to bring money? Can you prove it? If you can't, well, then no, don't spend time of it on it. We're not going to implement it. So it's extremely hard to kind of like be able to dedicate the time to purposefully and deeply explore AI tools. So one of the easy ways to go is kind of like hop on like the mainstream AI platforms, test it out, and then basically go to Midjourney. Um, so in Midjourney, it's often I would say like false received idea that it's easy. It's easy to kind of like get the wow effect. I was one of the first one. Went to Disco Diffusion, went to Midjourney V3, kind of like prompted a fish at the bottom of the ocean. Didn't look like a fish, kind of looked like the ocean, and I was blown away by the results. So the wow effect is straight away there. It's easy to kind of like conceptualize ideas and kind of like chat with a I would say like an artist that has like a virtual unlimited knowledge but doesn't know how to structure it and has no kind of like cognitive answer to analyze what it's producing. um so on the left hand side, you can see some outputs. So I've tried to generate like an RPG sword as well. One flame, one ice. So I kind of like got the idea of the flame, kind of like got the idea of the ice. Had to like write quite a long prompt, and none of those words are consistent. And that's one of the biggest issue whenever I'm talking with anyone that's exploring on Midjourney, is that it actually requires a days of crafting a prompt that is going to work for a very specific subset of assets that is actually not going to be used afterwards. So consistency is absolutely key, and Midjourney is not straightforward for that. So at Scenario, we enable studios to train custom AI models, and basically being able to prompt much shorter prompts, but also use a specific model that they've trained or that they can find on platform to basically very consistently get some outputs that can be used directly in games. So you can see I've prompted the flame sword, much shorter prompt. I used one of the platform model, which is the RPG inventory icons, and I can really see also like the flame component to it, and I can also see the ice component to it. Another key element is when you want to actually reproduce some IP, you might actually develop an IP, or you might be using an existing IP, and it's key to be able to produce a character in a consistent way and present them in a consistent way in different setups as well. So you've got your original art when you're trying to prompt in Midjourney or DALL-E 3 or any other kind of like mainstream platform where you can just put reference images or text. It's very hard to kind of like nail down the style, and it's very hard to like really respect the artwork and the conceptualization that goes behind it. Like certainly it gets the idea, it understands that in this case it's Red from Angry Bird, but it's not cohesive with the style of Angry Bird the movie, for example, which was my original art and what I tried to put as an output. Um, so this is something that you can definitely achieve with like a fine-tuned model. And for the ones that don't know what a fine-tuned model is that you take a large language model, you basically add some additional images to it. So it basically focuses on this subset of data to basically generate style consistent images. So there's six main issues from traditional and mainstream pipelines. When I'm saying traditional, I'm talking about like studios going to like asset stores, studios going to outsourcing companies. And then when I'm talking about like mainstream pipelines, I'm talking about mainstream AI tools. And there are like some similar issues there. So obviously with AI, you can get results in seconds, whereas like traditional pipelines, it can take weeks to basically get a few assets. Most of the time, traditional pipelines can be a little bit expensive. If you're going to an outsourcing company, if you're going to a game, to an asset store, it is definitely a little bit less, but then it's really not consistent with what you'd wanted, and you would need to kind of like shape your game around a specific style, rather than having something that is like highly unique and highly personalized. The formats are unique in general with traditional pipeline. You can't really adjust them. The amounts of edits are limited as well. And then some very complicated logistics, being able to really sort of like communicate the visuals and communicate like what you've got in mind to produce a game. And obviously one of the biggest factor, and something that's absolutely like really important as well, is basically the privacy and the ownership. So with mainstream AI tools, if you're using Midjourney, and this could be like the topic of a whole other talk, but if you're using Midjourney, you can't actually like claim any ownership on it. It's just a simple prompt that you fed it into an algorithm and you're using the output. You also don't have any privacy. If you're working on an IP, if you're working on a game that hasn't been released, you probably really don't want anybody else to see what you've been producing. So obviously on Scenario, it's a fully private platform. You have full ownership because you're basically fine tuning and training your model onto your own proprietary data. So Scenario, we offer, I think it's starting to be clear, we offer full control, so full creative control. And I think like the notion of a creative control is absolutely key. Talking to studios that have been using Midjourney, it's extremely hard to kind of like nail down a style. It's extremely hard to like edit some assets with precision. It's really not like a tool that is actually built for art teams. It's a tool that is built to basically get some magic if you're like a PM, get some magic if you're like an executive, to kind of like really convey some ideas across, but it's not precise enough for artists that are basically using the AI. So it's really important to offer them this control over the AI, and I would say like empower and upskill our teams with AIs that can work with them. We offer obviously like protection. Protection is a key, absolutely key a pillar of the AI that you should be using, choosing to work with. Making sure that your data is complete private by default. Making sure also with the current legal perspective that you have the full traceability of the data and that you have the full data governance as well. So you're being able to kind of like see and locate your assets and see who's created it, when it's been created, what's been used to actually create this asset, to basically prove that you've got all rights to be using this asset. And then obviously it's absolutely key to be integrated, integrated within workflows, integrated as well. Via an API, integrated within like current tools that like teams might be using, Unity, Unreal, Photoshop as well. The integration part is absolutely key for adoption. And talking of adoption, basically the main challenges that those studios are facing are long R&D to try a new tech, as mentioned. It's nearly 40% of them that basically highlighted this. And then it's the managing and the integration of those tools as well. So there's a crucial need for streamlined workflows that can be directly used by studios to achieve success as soon as possible, especially with new technologies that can look very foreign, that can like look also, I would say like for which we have very high expectations, but are not giving like straight away some consistent results. So here's a first use case. So showcasing what a fine-tuned model can do. So I've basically inputted 5 different images inside of Scenario, but like obviously I'm from Scenario, but you can use another tool, another platform if you'd want it. But there might be other challenges as well, on like using, for example, Stable Diffusion straight out the box. You might have some technical difficulties to install it. You might require some development skills. You might need to run like your GPUs locally. It might not be scalable, etc., etc. Anyways, from 5 assets, I was able to train a model and basically generate in a very consistent way some outputs as well. But I was able to prompt out of it very unique assets in a specific theme, which was like for me like the sea, and try to like generate a beach hut, a mermaid, a fish related items, etc. So it's very easy to train a model, generate consistent assets just using some text to image, prompting in a food truck with a fish, prompting in an aquarium, prompting in a beach shack, prompting in a mermaid on top of a rock. I haven't edited any of those assets. Those assets could be good enough to be integrated in games, could not be good enough to be integrated in game, would potentially need a little bit of overpaint, but already those are like some good assets that could be including. Another classic use case is very much like, hey, actually, like my artist worked on a sketch. Can I render in a specific style this sketch? So I just like make sure that I can directly integrate it into the game, or basically I can like skip a couple steps as well inside of my production pipeline, and basically like, okay, having it already kind of like rendered in the style that I like. So today there's the technologies out there where you can just input a sketch, input a reference style. So you're just using two different images, and basically you get an output that gets reskinned in the style that you'd like. So I've used again like the beach shot on the side to basically reskin this kind of like tank. So obviously depending on like the reference style is going to have like um I would say an impact as well on what it's going to be generating. Another use case that I'm very often seeing is like, hey, depending on the type of game that you're developing, if you're creating like a merger game, or if you're creating a game where basically people will need to collect some items as well, or if you're creating, I don't know, like a casual game where or a hyper casual game where like you would need backgrounds to change all the time, it's basically skinning of different assets. So basically what I've done here is taking a treasure chest that had generated, and I've used one of Scenario's model, which is classic 3D model, and I was able to just like prompting some very simple key terms and tokens to basically be like, hey, I want you to reskin this in a marble texture. I want you to reskin this for Halloween, so I can like make my assets seasonal. Risking it for ice, for golden, and I could have carried on really. And what it does is that it really keeps the consistency of my treasure chest, but it's also able to kind of like interpret as well for a specific theme. What it should be looking like, and you can literally just like produce thousands and hundreds of thousands of assets that can be consistent and that you can like plug inside of a game. And I think that also really speeds up, for example, the process for I don't know, seasonal events, for marketing, for live ops as well, or for localization. If you needed to localize, for example, I don't know, a background, if you needed to localize a character, those kind of things are definitely like doable and quite easy to achieve using technologies that are available out there. And in this case, what have I've used is underneath the hood is a control net depth, which basically understands and creates a grayscale of the asset that I've uploaded. So I've done the same with the background. So basically, also if you, I don't know, have like a battle scene where basically you need like a big empty space where you can like locate your characters on top. You can actually like input a reference image again using control net depth under the hood to basically understand the space that it should be respecting and the space that it basically should be leaving empty so you can position your characters. So once you've generated tons of assets, and I've spoken about integration, it's very important to basically streamline some workflows directly to engines that game developers might be using. So in this case, I mean, that scenario, we've created a Unity plugin. Obviously, like we've got an API. The API is open source, so you can actually like use it to integrate anywhere you like. But in this case, it's Unity. And one of the big use cases, we're like, okay, if I need to kind of like create like either a top down, or if I need to create like a game, like a city, and I need like isometric assets, is it actually like very easy to create specific tiles as well that could replace inside of Unity. And so obviously I feel like the process duration, it's 1 hour for me. I'm a noob in Unity. But basically, again, like using just like a tile as a reference, the tile that you've got as well by default, you can input it using it as a reference image to basically generate any consistent isometric asset that would like go straight inside of the engine. um, so one of the use cases that I'm seeing like very, very often is okay, I use Midjourney, or I use Scenario, but most of the time is, hey, I use Midjourney, and I have this one character. I want him to be the main character of my game. The only thing is that I can't do anything with it right now because basically I've just got one image of it, and it's impossible to integrate it inside of like a production pipeline because I've got just one asset. So again, using some options is good. So using two reference images. So in this case, like I've got this little blue guy on the left, and then I've combined it with different poses. Again, just using one single image. I haven't trained any model on a specific character for this case. I was able to combine what we call an IP adapter, which basically understands the essence of your image, plus a control net pose, which basically draws sort of like stickman that you can be using to basically generate this character consistently in different poses. So there might be some incoherences, sorry, but overall it's really adopting the pose, and it's very kind of like getting on the idea as well, my character and what it should be looking like in those poses. And the magic of it as well is that once you get like enough consistent data, you can take that data and basically retrain it inside of a model to basically like generate with much more consistency afterwards the character that you'd like to have. IP adapter is a magic thing. So as mentioned, it really recognizes your image, and then it can like basically like apply this image or this character to specific poses, but also to specific emotions. So just using one single token, smiling, angry, frowning, screaming with mouth open, I'm very much able to bring this character to generate different moods. So still going on characters, a key use case as well that I'm like very often seeing is, hey, how can I basically create consistent turnarounds? And turnarounds are not easy to achieve with AI. Often you would get some artifacts. Often you would get two people facing front way, or two people facing like back way or side way, or you might not get like the same character at all. So using dual reference images as well really enables to basically tackle and achieve very consistent turnarounds that could be usable afterwards. So in this case, I've uploaded a sketch. So this is just to exemplify, okay, I haven't drawn the sketch. I haven't got like directly the rights to use the sketch, but I just really wanted to exemplify basically this workflow with an org. So in putting the sketch inside of Scenario, I was able again to create a grayscale of these orgs in those different orientation, and I've combined it with like a reference image, an IP adapter again of the org that I would like to see in the turnaround. And on the right, you can see the output that I was able to generate. So I can definitely see that it's taken like the muscle structure and the overall structure of my sketch. It has inputted the orc on top of it. It is still not 100% perfect, and that is for sure. I can see that the hair is not perfectly right. I can see that the obviously the shield's like kind of like has jumped off. I can see that the expression is actually pretty much on point. And I can see that the strokes as well, like a lot heavier inside of like the output. But still, this is a great reference image, a great turnaround that basically an artist can use to basically paint over. And instead of spending like days creating like this turnaround and basically like sketching it, okay, the artist basically got already a basis in a couple of seconds or in 10 minutes in this case that can be reused um, to basically as a base to basically resketch in like a couple of hours. Um, so talking about resketching, sometimes I often get a question like, hey, can I actually like edit some assets directly inside of scenario? Is this something that is like feasible? For example, I've got a background, but I've got like a lot of artifacts. How do I remove those artifacts? I do need to use AI to regenerate like some bits and bobs as well, or potentially like render an image that I've imported from the internet. Is that feasible? So we've got a great tool, which is the Canvas, which looks a little bit like Adobe Firefly with like its generative field. Um, the main strength of it is that it really sort of like uploads the model that you've trained onto your specific style and will render anything into that style as well. So it's pretty powerful to kind of like also like remove assets, move them around, create different layers that you can then afterwards also export into Photoshop if you wanted to like work further on it. But this really enables you to, because the AI would it is often producing artifacts depending on how you've trained it. But this really removes like enables to remove it, but also to generate like specific assets, such as like here you can see like this little picnic basket that I can move around. I can basically also render more mountains in the back, and this is kind of like great if I want to like edit on top of some of the images. So when I'm talking about AI, and obviously now I've spoken mainly about 2D to 3D, sorry, about generation of 3D assets. So very often I get a question like, hey, what about 3D? 3D is kind of like the holy grail. Um, so the technology is evolving extremely fast. Originally, a scenario. Before we were fully focused on generative AI, we were more like an application that enabled you to scan anything in 3D and then play those assets inside of mini games and then also transform those assets. Um, but from that point, literally like nearly 3 years ago to today, the technology is crazily insane when it comes to scanning, but also when it comes to like, okay, generating some 2D to 3D assets. So most of the use cases that I'm seeing is that, okay, now the 3D starts to be ready and starts to be of good quality enough that I can basically use it either for mobile games. So, you know, I need like very small assets. They don't need to have like the perfect mesh. It doesn't need to have like the most sort of like highest resolution texture. This is like usable. I can basically import that into my game, potentially as an artist as well, to like a 3D artist to kind of like rework it a little bit. But mostly usable. Another use case I'm very often seeing is actually if you're working on a PC game, potentially AA, AAA, you've got different like level of details, and actually the assets that are in the background is not what your camera is going to be focusing on. And so basically using AI to generate some 3D assets for those, I would say like a decorative asset is definitely a workflow that is durable today. The only thing is that obviously like you'd still want them to be consistent. So scenario in our case, because we produce like highly consistent and malleable assets, um, we can do a workflow where you have like one real image. So for example, the image of this rock here that you're like bringing inside of scenario to render in the style of your game. You can do a remove background, etc. And so you have the image that you'd like to feed inside of a 3D software. And so we're working with a lot of partners to basically facilitate that and facilitate this workflow of like 2D creation inside of like directly a 3D asset output. Sorry. Um, so yeah, often I get a question as well, like, hey, is like basically text to 3D ready? And actually very often that makes me laugh because um, generating text to 3D, you would need to feed in so many information, such as like the weight, the texture of your image, the colors of it as well. You would need to feed in as well, basically the mechanics. For example, if you've got like a whole scene, that the technology is not quite ready yet. And text to 3D for me is going to be great to kind of like have some quick ideas, a little bit like Midjourney, but nothing actually like really usable. So that's why like I'm a firm believer also that creating like your own model, using it to produce a highly consistent 2D asset, and then bring this 2D asset into 3D is kind of a workflow that works really well, especially for some of our customers. Um, so obviously we love studios. We've got amazing studios that basically are using us already, and I'd like just to mention a couple of them for which I really like the approach. So we're working quite a bit with InnoGames. We're working on some of the games, such as like Elvenar, for example. They were very early adopter of the technology, and what I really liked about it is that about their approach of integrating AI is that they really accompanied their artists and they were able to upskill their team through the use of generative AI, meaning that, for example, a UI UX artist was able to do some concept art that he wasn't able to do before, and the concept artist, she was able to move to another team to basically produce like new concept art as well, and they really like empowered the art team by using the AI. Mighty Bear is an example that I really like as well because it's a smaller team. There's only 5 people on the team, on the art team. And basically, what the AI is able to do for them, and especially so, if I'm backtracking a little bit, Mighty Bear was using a pipeline where they were using Comfy UI plus Stable Diffusion, and basically it's a complicated pipeline. They need some developer, and now Scenario is like their go-to tool to like basically test their workflow. And if they can't do it on Scenario, then basically like they will move back to like Stable Diffusion and Comfy UI. But like today 80% of their workflow is actually going through Scenario because it's all possible. And the way that they look at AI is that artists don't need to like spend hours and hours creating a sword, for example, with like a ruby, a sapphire, an emerald, etc. They can actually like streamline that all and spend a lot more time on creativity, and they've really empowered the team as well to not be just like they're artists, but also to be like art directed. I've got something to say inside of the game that can like basically spend a lot of time on like very strong proposition that can be included. Um, so yeah, so if you haven't got it yet, there's an infinity of possibilities. You can train your AI model. You can blend models together as well if you wanted, exploring new styles, blending UX UI icons with characters, for example. So yeah, AI really opens a lot of doors for like the generation of assets. It's just a matter of like controlling it, and it's just a matter as well of giving the flexibility as well to our team to gain full control over it. AI can accelerate pipelines, as mentioned with InnoGames. For example, InnoGames I gained 100% of time over like basically the shipping of game assets for the games. But it's very important to really empower artists so they can actually produce more and also meet those tight deadlines that we mentioned at the beginning of this talk, where like literally like 97% of studios need to produce prototypes under 3 months. So yeah, so I'm finishing by this quote by Albert Einstein: creativity is intelligence having fun. So generative AI is about having fun whilst delivering for the industry and enabling it to basically meet those tight deadlines and be more creative. So yeah, so this is me, and thank you very much.